Good evening and welcome back. Settle now into the quiet and imagine that the night has lowered itself gently around you, not like a curtain falling, but like a dark river widening in silence. You do not have to follow quickly. There is nowhere in this story that asks you to hurry. Let the room become still. Let the edges of the day loosen. Somewhere beyond the ordinary walls, beyond the small lamps and familiar sounds, there is an older darkness, a darkness that belonged to caves, cypress trees, deep valleys, and the spaces between the stars. In that darkness, a single sound begins. It is not loud, it does not command. It simply appears as if a hand has brushed a string in the dark, and the string has remembered the shape of longing. This is the sound of a lyre. It is wood and gut, shell and craft. But in myth it becomes more than an instrument. It becomes a bridge. It becomes a lamp. It becomes a voice for all the things a human heart cannot say directly. Tonight, we follow that sound downward into one of the tenderest and most sorrowful stories the ancient Greeks left behind. It is the story of Orpheus, whose song could soften stone, calm beasts, and move the rulers of the dead. It is the story of Eurydice, whose name is often spoken only as loss, though before she was lost, she was a living presence, a beloved woman, a quiet brightness in the breathing world. It is the story of a descent into the underworld, of a promise almost fulfilled, and of one backward glance that has troubled listeners for centuries. But we will not enter it harshly. We will enter as one enters a dream by moonlight, with care, with patience, and with the understanding that myths are not puzzles to be solved once and for all. They are deep rooms. They echo differently each time we step inside. In the oldest myth of the tale, Orpheus belongs to Thrace, that northern region which Greek imagination filled with mountains, wild winds, horses, forests, and strange sacred songs. Thrace was not the gentle center of the Greek world. It was a borderland, a place both familiar and distant, close enough to name and far enough to dream about. There the hills rose dark against the sky, and rivers moved through valleys where winter seemed to remember itself longer than in the southern islands. It is fitting that Orpheus should come from such a place. He's never only a court musician or a pleasant singer at feasts. He is a border figure. He stands between human and divine, between wilderness and order, between the living and the dead. His music is beautiful, but it carries the chill of thresholds. The ancients told different things about his birth, as they often did with figures too bright to belong to a single family line. Many said that his mother was Calliope, the muse whose name means beautiful voice, the muse of epic song, the keeper of high poetry and memory. To be born of Calliope is to be born from the very breath of story. It means that before Orpheus learned words, song had already leaned over his cradle. Some traditions named his father as Wagrus, a Thracian king or river god, giving him the blood of the northern land, the pulse of water and earth. Others connected him to Apollo, lord of the lyre, god of music, prophecy, sunlight, healing, and the clear far note that seems to travel across open air. Whether Apollo was called his father, his teacher, or his divine source, the connection matters. Orpheus is a child of song, and song in Greek myth is never merely decoration. It is a way of knowing. Imagine him as a boy in a landscape of pale dawn and dark pines. The air is cold enough that breath appears and vanishes. Sheep move like dim clouds over the slopes. Somewhere, a river speaks over stones. He listens more than other children listen. He hears not only the bird, but the pause before the bird. He hears not only the water, but the little grief of water, leaving each stone behind. When he is given the lyre, or when he finds it, or when Apollo places it in his hands, depending on which old singer you trust, he does not treat it like an object. He treats it like a creature that has been waiting for him. The first notes are simple. They tremble, then they settle, and the world seems to tilt slightly toward them. The lyre itself was already a wonder in Greek imagination. Hermes, clever and quick, was said to have made the first one from a tortoise shell, stretching strings across emptiness so that emptiness could sing. Apollo took it into his own radiant order and made music part of divine measure. In Orpheus's hands, the instrument becomes more intimate and more dangerous. It does not only praise the gods, it persuades existence. It asks the world to remember that all things vibrate, all things answer, all things are touched by rhythm, even when they seem mute. When Orpheus plays, birds descend from high branches and forget to be afraid. Deer come near and lower their heads. Wolves pause at the edge of the clearing, their yellow eyes dimming into peace. Trees lean, or so the story says, drawing their roots through the soil as if the earth itself were willing to be moved. Do not imagine this too literally if it troubles you. Myth often speaks in the language of impossible images because ordinary speech is too small. When we are told that stones followed Orpheus, perhaps we are being told that even hardness listened. When rivers slowed for him, perhaps we are being told that the endless rush of time paused for a moment, just long enough for longing to be heard. When animals gathered, predator beside prey, perhaps we are being shown a dream of harmony, a world briefly released from hunger. This is what his music does. It does not erase sorrow. It gathers it into pattern. It does not conquer nature. It allows nature to breathe in one rhythm. And when a human being hears such music, the heart may feel, for a little while, less alone inside the body. Orpheus grows into fame, though fame is not the right word for what surrounds him. Fame is noisy, and Orpheus's power is often quiet. Kings call for him, sailors speak of him, women and men remember where they stood when they first heard him. The Argonauts, those voyagers of another great Greek story, are sometimes said to have taken him with them on the Argo, not because he could lift a spear better than another hero, but because there are dangers that strength cannot answer. When the sea is angry, when oarsmen lose heart, when strange voices rise from beyond the foam, a song may hold people together more surely than bronze. Orpheus belongs among heroes, but not as a fighter of battles. He is a mender of attention. He gathers frightened souls back into one breath, and yet, for all this wonder, the story that keeps his name alive is not a story of triumph. It is a love story, and more than a love story, a grief story. Into his life comes Eurydice. Her name has been interpreted in different ways, sometimes connected with wide justice or far-reaching right, though names in myth often shine through several veils. She's called a nymph in many tellings, one of those beings who belong to groves, springs, meadows, and the green, breathing places of the world. But let us not make her only a symbol. Imagine her first as someone alive in sunlight. She walks among grasses wet with morning. She knows the weight of flowers in her hand. She has a voice that does not need to be famous to be beloved. She laughs perhaps softly. She listens to Orpheus not as crowds listen, amazed at a marvel, but as one person listens to another and hears the solitude beneath the gift. That may be why he loves her, not because she's merely beautiful, though beauty surrounds her in the story like a pale aura, but because with her the song does not need to prove itself. So much of Orpheus's life is response, the world responding to the lyre, the trees leaning, the beasts gathering, the people weeping. With Eurydice, there is something simpler and more complete. He plays, and she hears him. She speaks, and he hears her. Their love is not the conquest of one heart by another. It is a duet, two separate lines finding harmony without losing their own shape. In the dark architecture of the myth, this matters. The underworld will later demand silence from him, and his test will be to trust what he cannot see. Love begins as listening, and it will be endangered by the need for proof. Their wedding arrives like a brief season of light. In ancient imagination, weddings were not only private happiness, they were thresholds, sacred crossings from one form of life into another. Hymen, the god of marriage song, is sometimes invoked in these tales, and in some versions the signs at the wedding are uneasy. The torch may smoke, the song may falter, the air may carry a warning no one can interpret until after sorrow has arrived. But we do not need to make the day grim from the beginning. Let there be garlands, let there be friends, let there be the scent of crushed leaves and wine, the murmur of voices, the small shy glances between bride and groom when ceremony becomes real. Let Orpheus play not as a wonder worker, but as a husband whose joy has made him humble. Eurydice moves through that day like a white flower in shade and sun. Perhaps she is crowned with blossoms. Perhaps her hands are warm from holding other hands. Around her, the world seems blessed simply because it continues. Bees in the air, dust in gold light, the long grass leaning under wind. Yet Greek myth often places fragility beside beauty, not to punish beauty, but to remind us how thin the veil is. After the wedding in the meadows, the shadow comes. Some tellings say that Aristaeus, a rustic god or shepherd figure, desired Eurydice and pursued her. Others pass quickly over the cause and remember only the snake hidden in the grass. For our sleeping path, we will not linger on fear. We see only the meadow, the sudden stillness, the small unseen danger, and Eurydice stepping where no one knew harm was waiting. The snake bite is not a spectacle, it is a quiet wound in the day. The grass continues to move. The insects continue their thin, bright music. Somewhere, someone is still laughing, not yet knowing that the world has changed. Eurydice feels the pain, then the strange distance that comes when life begins to loosen its hold. Those who love her gather, but love cannot always command the body to stay. Orpheus comes, or perhaps he is already near, and the myth gives us one of its cruelest silences. The greatest musician in the world has no note that can close this opening. He may sing her name. He may call to Apollo, to Calliope, to every god who ever touched a string. But the meadow does not answer as the trees once did. The breath leaves gently, and Eurydice passes from the upper air. There is a kind of grief that makes the world appear false. The sun rises, and the grieving heart thinks, how can it rise? People speak, and the words seem to come from behind glass. Food is placed before the mourner. Water is offered. Hands touch his shoulder. All of it is kind, and none of it reaches the place where the loss has gone. Orpheus, who once made others feel understood, now discovers the loneliness that even music cannot immediately cross. He sits with the lyre in his lap, and it is no longer a wonder. It is wood. It is strings. It is a thing that failed. The same instrument that could draw trees from their roots could not keep one beloved soul from slipping downward. He sings anyway. What else can he do? He sings to the hills of Thrace until the hills return his voice in broken echoes. He sings beside rivers, and the rivers seem to darken as they carry the sound away. He sings at night beneath constellations that look cold and ancient, and perhaps for the first time he understands why mortals have always feared the distance between earth and stars. His songs are no longer made to charm. They are questions. They are refusals. They are hands pressed against a door. In them he remembers Eurydice walking, Eurydice turning her head, Eurydice asleep, Eurydice listening. Memory does what memory does in grief. It gives and wounds at the same time. In many stories, mourning eventually bends toward acceptance. The bereaved remain among the living. They learn the altered shape of the world. They carry love as a hidden flame. But Orpheus is not an ordinary mourner, and myth is not ordinary time. His gift has always been to cross boundaries by song. If trees have followed him, if wild beasts have forgotten hunger, if the sea has steadied under his voice, then one boundary remains, the oldest boundary, the one from which no traveller returns. The underworld lies below, not merely under the ground, but under the visible order of things. It is the house of Hades, the unseen one, the receiver of all. Orpheus looks toward that darkness, and grief becomes a road. The decision to descend is not made with heroic shouting. It is made in exhaustion, in a silence after tears, when the impossible begins to seem like the only honest thing left. Perhaps friends beg him not to go. Perhaps they remind him that the gods have set limits. Perhaps his mother Calliope, if we imagine her near, understands that songs sometimes must travel where advice cannot. Orpheus takes the lyre, he leaves the familiar paths. He goes toward the places where caves breathe cold air even in summer, where springs disappear under stone, where ancient people imagined entrances to the realm below. Every culture has such places. Mouths in the earth, black pools, fissures, caverns, the sense that the ground is not solid, but hiding a vast inward night. As he descends, the air changes. The living world does not vanish all at once. First the birds become fewer, then the trees thin, then the light loses colour, not becoming dark exactly, but becoming old. The stones are damp. The path underfoot is uncertain. Each step sounds too clear, as if the earth is listening. Orpheus carries no sword bright enough to matter here. He has no shield. He has no army. He has only the lyre, and perhaps that is why the descent remains so powerful. He does not force the gate. He does not break the law of death with violence. He brings beauty to the place where beauty seems least expected, and asks whether even there something might answer. The Greeks imagined the underworld in many overlapping ways. It was not simply a place of punishment, though punishments existed there in story. It was the wide house of the dead, a dim realm where shades, the faint images of those who had lived, moved without the fullness of earthly breath. Rivers marked its geography. Styx, the hateful or solemn river of oath. Acheron, river of woe. Cocytus, river of lamentation. Phlegethon, sometimes a river of fire. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Different poets arranged them differently because the underworld is less a map than a mood. It is distance. It is finality. It is the place where names become whispers unless memory carries them. At the river, Orpheus meets Charon. The ferryman is old in the way only mythic figures can be old, not with years, but with repetition. He has carried kings and beggars, warriors and infants, brides and thieves, all reduced to the same pale need to cross. His boat is dark, his hands are hard. His face has watched every kind of farewell and has learned not to soften. In many traditions, the dead require a coin for passage, an obol placed with care by the living. Orpheus is not dead, and so he does not belong at the river. Charon sees him and refuses. That is the law. The living do not cross in that direction by desire alone. Orpheus does not argue like a lawyer. He does not threaten. He sits or stands near the black water and lifts the lyre. The first notes fall lightly, like drops into a still pool. Charon has heard weeping for ages. He has heard pleading, bargaining, denial, curses thrown backward at the world of light. But this is different. Orpheus does not sing only of his own pain. He sings of every hand that has released another hand at the riverbank. He sings of mothers who placed coins under cold tongues. He sings of old men who felt the sun for the last time on their faces. He sings of children whose names were spoken until the speakers themselves came down to join them. The ferryman listens, and something within his ancient duty grows quiet. The boat receives Orpheus. It does not welcome him exactly, but it holds his weight. The river is wide, wider than it appeared from the shore. No stars shine in it. The oar makes almost no sound. As they cross, Orpheus looks into the water and perhaps sees nothing, or perhaps sees memories drifting beneath the surface like pale leaves. Charon says little. Ferrymen in myths do not need many words. The passage itself is the speech. Behind them, the shore of the living becomes a grey suggestion. Ahead, the underworld opens, not with flames and thunder, but with an enormous hush. It is the hush of everything that has ended. On the far side waits Cerberus, the hound of Hades. Later, art gives him 3 heads, sometimes more, with serpents and monstrous details. But in a sleep story, we need not sharpen him into terror. Imagine instead a vast guardian presence, dark as cave stone, breathing the breath of the deep earth. 3 heads lift from shadow. 3 pairs of eyes regard the living man who should not be here. Cerberus is not evil. He is a keeper of boundaries. He prevents the dead from wandering back and the living from trespassing too easily. His growl is like distant thunder under a mountain. Orpheus feels the sound in his bones. Again he plays. The melody is lower now because the underworld has entered the wood of the instrument. The strings answer with a sound like dusk. 1 head of Cerberus lowers, then another, then the 3rd. The guardian listens, and in listening remembers, if a guardian can remember, the time before guarding, the first dark command, the hand of Hades upon his head, the endless labor of watching doors that no one wants to reach and everyone must reach. Orpheus sings not to defeat him, but to give him rest. The great hound settles. His breathing slows. The path beyond him opens. Now the shades gather. They come as people come toward warmth, though there is no warmth here. They are drawn by the music, because music belongs to the living body, and the dead remember the body as one remembers a country left in childhood. They remember lungs filling, feet aching, hair lifted by wind, tears hot on the face, bread in the mouth, rain. on the skin. They come pale and quiet, queens beside servants, soldiers beside those they frightened, old enemies no longer strong enough to hate. Orpheus sees them and understands that death is not only the loss of one beloved, it is the destination of every beloved, every stranger, every singer, every listener. His grief widens until it is almost compassion. The famous sufferers of the underworld pause as well, because myth loves to imagine even eternal patterns, interrupted by song. Tantalus, forever thirsty and hungry, forgets for a moment the fruit above him and the water below. Ixion's wheel slows in its turning. Sisyphus rests against his stone, and the stone does not roll back immediately. The daughters of Danaus, condemned to fill leaking jars, lower their vessels and listen to the sound that does not leak away. These images may come from later poets, but they reveal the ancient imagination at its most tender. Orpheus's music does not abolish justice or undo the old sentences. It gives pause. Sometimes a pause is the only mercy myth can imagine. Deeper still is the Hall of Hades. Do not picture it as a throne room of simple terror. Hades, whose name means the unseen one, is not the same as death itself, nor is he a devil in the later sense. He is a god, stern and remote, ruler of what cannot be returned. His wealth is hidden wealth, metals under earth, seeds under soil, the countless dead who belong to his keeping. He's not easily moved because his office cannot be easily moved. If every grief opened the gates, the order of the world would dissolve. Beside him sits Persephone, queen below and daughter above, she who knows both meadow flowers and pomegranate darkness. In her presence, the underworld has a memory of spring. Before them stands Orpheus, living among the dead, breathing in a place of breathless shades. It is possible that he trembles. Let him tremble. Courage is not the absence of trembling. He has come farther than any song should have to come. He has crossed the river, soothed the guardian, drawn the dead into listening. Now he must address the powers who hold Eurydice. He could demand, but demand would fail. He could accuse, but accusation would break against the law of things. Instead he plays, and then he sings words that poets have imagined in many forms, that love brought him here, that all mortals come to this house eventually, that he does not ask to keep Eurydice from Hades forever, only to receive the years that were cut away too soon. His song fills the hall. It does not brighten it. The underworld is not changed into daylight. Rather, the darkness becomes articulate. It becomes capable of hearing itself. Orpheus sings of the meadow and the wedding, of a torch that should have burned longer, of a bride taken before the song of marriage had faded. He sings of how the living try to accept the law of death, and how sometimes the heart cannot move at the speed of law. He sings of Persephone's own descent, though softly, not as accusation but as recognition. She too knows the tier between above and below. She too has been missed by a mother under a grieving sky. The queen listens, and perhaps her face changes first. Hades listens also. His stillness is not emptiness. It is the stillness of a judge who knows that pity can be dangerous if it becomes disorder, and cruelty can be disguised as firmness if it never bends. Around him the shades weep without tears. The Furies, if they are near, lower their solemn attention. The iron laws of the underworld do not vanish, but they seem, for one suspended moment, to remember why laws exist at all. Not to mock love, not to make grief meaningless, but to hold a world in which even love must learn limits. Orpheus's song presses against that limit. It does not shatter it, it makes it transparent. Then comes the gift, if gift is the right word for something so fragile. Eurydice may return. The dead bride may follow her living husband upward. But there is a condition. Orpheus must walk ahead. Eurydice will come behind him. He must not look back until they have both reached the light of the upper world. Not until both are fully beyond the threshold. Not when he feels the first breath of living air. Not when he sees the first grey brightening of the cave mouth. Both must be free before his eyes seek her. The rule is simple. That is part of its cruelty. It is so simple that anyone hearing the tale thinks, I would obey. I would keep walking. I would not turn. But myths endure because they know us better than our confident thoughts know us. To walk forward while the beloved follows unseen is not simple. It is a test made from the deepest materials of grief. Grief wants evidence, love wants the face. Fear invents silence and then believes in it. The mind asks, is she truly there? Did the gods deceive me? Did she stumble? Did I move too quickly? Is she fading? Is the sound behind me her footstep, or only my own echo returning from stone? The condition asks Orpheus to trust precisely where he has been wounded. It asks a singer whose life is response to accept no response. It asks the lover to love without looking. Still, he begins. The ascent from the underworld is longer than the descent because hope is heavier than despair. When he went down, every step was driven by loss. Now every step must carry possibility. The path rises through corridors of dim stone. The air is cold, then less cold. Behind him, perhaps, there is the faintest sound, a footfall, a breath. Or perhaps Eurydice is still shade enough that she makes no sound at all. Orpheus holds the lyre close but does not play, because perhaps he is afraid that if he plays, he will not hear her. Or perhaps the rule forbids any attempt to call her forward. The silence becomes another instrument, and it plays upon his nerves. Imagine Eurydice behind him. She has been given back, but not fully. The underworld still clings to her like mist. She sees Orpheus ahead, the shape of his shoulders, the careful placement of his feet. She may want to speak. Some versions make her silent because the dead cannot speak until restored. Some make the command fall on both of them. Some leave her in a world unrecorded, which is its own sorrow. But we can imagine her tenderness. She sees how hard he is trying. She knows the strain in him. She knows, perhaps, that love can fail not from lack of love, but from too much fear within love. She follows. They pass the shades who watch without, calling out. Cerberus remains still. Charon waits beside his river and does not speak. The boat carries them back across, or perhaps the upward path passes by another way. In myth, geography bends around meaning. What matters is that Orpheus moves from depth toward light, and that every boundary crossed below must now be crossed again in reverse. The river, the gate, the dim fields, the cave road. Each is a layer between death and life. Each layer tests his trust. The farther he climbs, the more possible the return becomes, and the more possible it becomes, the more unbearable the uncertainty. This is one of the quiet truths of the myth. When hope is distant, we can sometimes endure distance. But when hope is close, almost within reach, the heart becomes frantic. The first hints of the upper world arrive. The air changes. It carries mineral dampness, then root scent, then perhaps the faint green smell of living plants. Orpheus sees a paler darkness ahead, Not daylight yet, but the promise of it. His body remembers the world before his mind permits belief. He thinks of Eurydice stepping into morning. He thinks of her face receiving the sun. He thinks of all the songs he will play for her, not to rescue her, not to persuade the dead, but simply because she is there to hear them. Then the doubt comes like a hand to the throat. Why is she so quiet? Why has she not touched him? Why do the gods require this silence, if not because there is nothing behind him? Perhaps Hades, grave and subtle, has allowed only the idea of Eurydice to follow. Perhaps Persephone pitied him but could not change the law. Perhaps he is walking alone, and when he reaches the light, he will discover that his hope has been another form of punishment. The thoughts are not noble. They are human, they move quickly, they feed one another. He tries to keep walking, he may whisper her name, though he knows he should not. The cave mouth nears. At the final threshold, light touches his face. This is the cruelest instant. He is almost there. Some versions say he has already stepped into the upper air, while Eurydice remains just behind, still within the boundary. He feels sunlight, or dawn wind, or the living world opening around him. Relief surges through him, and relief breaks discipline more often than terror does. He turns. Perhaps it is only a small turn of the head. A motion born before thought can stop it. Perhaps it is a full turning, arms reaching. He looks back, and she is there. That is the wound. If she had not been there, the story would be about deception. But she is there, close enough to see, close enough perhaps for their eyes to meet. Eurydice stands in the grey threshold between worlds. For one suspended breath, Orpheus sees the face he crossed death to find. She is not an illusion, she is not a trick. She has followed all the way from the halls of Hades. The gift was real. The condition was real. His failure is real. Her loss is real. Everything is real, and there is no mercy in choosing which part to deny. She begins to fade, or rather the underworld begins to reclaim what has not fully crossed. The old poets give her a farewell, sometimes gentle, sometimes wordless. Ovid imagines that she does not complain. What could she complain of except that she was loved? This is not to excuse the turning, but to deepen it. Eurydice understands, perhaps in that final vanishing, that Orpheus looked because he loved and feared in the same breath. Love opened the road, fear broke the command. The two were braided together in him too tightly to separate. She slips backward, down into the dark, not violently, not with spectacle, but like a reflection leaving water when the lamp is moved. Orpheus reaches for her. His hands close on air. The light around him, which should have been triumph, becomes unbearable. He tries to follow again. He runs back toward the opening, but the way is closed. Charon will not ferry him a second time while he lives. The laws that bent once will not bend again. This is another hard mercy of the myth. Even the greatest song cannot make grief repeat its bargain until it gets the answer it wants. Orpheus remains above, and Eurydice remains below. The world is restored to order, but order now feels like a locked door. Here, many listeners become angry with Orpheus. Why did he turn? Why could he not wait a few more steps? The question is natural. It is also part of the myth's design. We stand outside the cave and believe obedience would be easy because we are not the one walking with silence at our back. We know she is there because the story tells us. He does not know in the same way. He has only trust, and trust after loss is not a clean virtue. It is a shaking bridge. The backward glance is not merely foolishness, it is the moment when love cannot bear to remain invisible. It is the human need to see, to confirm, to hold with the eyes what the heart has already lost once. The tragedy is that the need itself is understandable. The command is not arbitrary because it reveals exactly where Orpheus is most wounded. He can charm the world, but he cannot master the fear inside his own love. He can move Hades, but he cannot quiet the small, desperate voice that says, "Look now," before it is too late. Myths often place the true trial not in the monster, not in the storm, not in the hall of the god, but in the inward chamber. Cerberus slept. Charon yielded. Hades listened. But Orpheus's own doubt did not sleep, yield, or listen. It rose at the threshold. Afterward, Orpheus is changed. How could he not be? He has seen the underworld and returned without the one he sought. He has won and lost in the same motion. He knows now that his music can reach farther than any mortal music should, and also that even this reach has limits. This knowledge is not peaceful. Some stories say he withdrew from the company of women or from ordinary love, unable or unwilling to replace Eurydice. Some say he taught men sacred rites. Some say he wandered in Thrace, singing to rocks and rivers, but the songs were different now. They carried the underworld in them. They were not made for celebration, they were made for remembrance. Imagine him in the years after. Though myth does not give us ordinary years, he walks under trees that once followed him, but now they remain rooted, listening. He sits beside rivers and the water takes his melodies away. Young people come to hear him expecting marvels. They receive something stranger, a beauty that makes them quiet. Orpheus has become a keeper of absence. His voice tells the living that love does not end simply because the beloved is unseen, but neither does love abolish every boundary. He sings of Eurydice, not to summon her now, but to keep faith with the fact that she lived. This is one of art's oldest tasks, not to reverse death, but to prevent love from being swallowed by silence. The later ending of Orpheus's life is sorrowful, and we will pass through it gently. Ancient sources tell that he was killed by Thracian women, often identified with Maenads, followers of Dionysus, in a moment of frenzy or anger, because he rejected them, or because he honored Apollo above Dionysus, or because mysteries and grief had set him apart from ordinary bonds. The versions differ, and the details can be violent. We do not need to dwell there. What matters for this night is the image that survives the violence, his head and lyre floating down the river Hebrus, still singing. Even after the body's lost, the song continues. The lyre drifts toward the sea. The voice becomes less a man than a current of memory. In some traditions, the muses gather the remains of Orpheus and bury them. His lyre is placed among the stars as a constellation or kept as a sacred sign. The night sky, which once looked cold to him in grief, now holds the shape of his instrument. This is myth's way of giving back what history cannot. It says that song does not die in the same manner as flesh. It changes location. It becomes ritual, echo, poem, constellation, whispered name. Orpheus fails to bring Eurydice fully back, but he brings back a knowledge, and that knowledge travels through centuries. It enters the mouths of poets, the hands of musicians, the thoughts of mourners lying awake after midnight. From Orpheus grew a shadowy body of religious and poetic tradition often called Orphic. Scholars speak carefully here, because Orpheus is both a mythic singer and a name attached to hymns, rites, teachings, and mysteries that developed across time. The Orphic traditions were concerned with the soul, with purification, with the divine and mortal mixture inside human beings, with descent and return, with memory and forgetfulness after death. Gold tablets found in graves in parts of the Greek world preserve instructions for the soul in the afterlife, telling it what to say, which spring to avoid, which water to seek, how to remember its divine origin. These are not simply footnotes to the love story. They show how deeply Orpheus became associated with crossing the boundary between worlds. It makes sense. A singer who went below and returned, even wounded, becomes a guide for others imagining their own passage. Orpheus did not conquer death, but he entered its country and learned its acoustics. He knew which silences were doors. He knew that memory mattered. In some Orphic imagination, the soul must avoid Lethe, the water of forgetfulness, and seek instead the lake of memory, Mnemosyne. This is beautiful and strange. To be saved is not only to be forgiven or released, it is to remember who you are. Orpheus's own tragedy turns on memory and sight. He cannot stop remembering Eurydice, and he cannot bear not seeing her. Later, seekers turned his name into a hope that the soul might remember its way home. The myth also asks what art can do. It is tempting to answer grandly. Art can move gods, soften death, charm beasts, suspend punishment, and make the universe listen. The story says yes for a while, but it also says art cannot do everything. Orpheus's song wins the impossible condition, but it does not give him the inward steadiness to fulfill it. Art can open doors that the artist may still be too human to pass through unchanged. This is not an insult to art. It is what makes art truthful. A song may carry grief, shape grief, make grief shareable, and give grief a chamber where it can echo without destroying the one who hears it. But a song does not make the singer immortal. A poem does not exempt the poet from fear. Perhaps that is why the story lasts. If Orpheus had simply descended, played, and returned with Eurydice, we would have a marvel, but not the same mirror. If he had been refused from the beginning, we would have a warning about limits, but not the same ache. Instead, the myth gives us almost. The song almost brought Eurydice back. Almost is one of the most haunting words in human life. Almost healed, almost held, almost forgiven, almost home. In that almost, listeners recognize the fragile border between what love intends and what human beings can bear. Orpheus does not fail because he lacks love. He fails because he is made of love and fear, memory and desire, hope and doubt. In other words, because he is mortal. Eurydice, too, must be restored to the center of our attention. Too often she becomes only the object of Orpheus's quest, the silent measure of his loss. But the story is hers as well. She is the one taken from daylight, the one asked to follow unseen, the one who nearly returns, the one who loses the upper world twice. Her silence in the ancient versions can feel like erasure, but it can also invite a reverent listening. What would it mean to follow someone who must not look at you? What trust would be required of her? What patience, what tenderness in that final moment when she sees him turn and understands everything at once. In a gentle reading of the myth, Eurydice is not angry because the loss is beyond anger. She is sorrowful, loving, and already being drawn where anger cannot remain. There is another way to hear the backward glance. It may be the moment when Orpheus chooses memory over faith. Faith, here, does not mean belief in doctrine. It means walking toward the light while trusting the unseen beloved. Memory says, I know her by her face. I cannot go on without the face. Both are forms of love. One belongs to the future, one to the past. Orpheus, who is the great singer of memory, turns toward what he knows. He cannot yet love the unseen future more than the remembered face. So, the myth asks us, with great softness and severity, whether love sometimes must release the need to look back, not forget, never forget, but walk. For those who grieve, this question can be tender and difficult. Grief often feels like loyalty to the vanished. To move forward can feel like betrayal. To laugh again, sleep again, love the morning again, can feel like turning away from the dead. But perhaps the myth, in its sorrow, teaches that there are different kinds of looking back. Some looking back honors, some looking back traps. Orpheus's glance happens at the threshold before both have reached life. It is too soon. The story does not tell us never to remember. Orpheus's whole life becomes remembrance. It tells us that certain passages require us to carry love without constantly reopening the door behind us. There is a time to descend, a time to sing, a time to trust the unseen footstep, and a time to let the song become breath. If you are listening now in darkness, you do not need to solve this. Let the myth be a slow river beside you. Let Orpheus walk his path. Let Eurydice follow. Let the old gods sit in their shadowed hall. Let Charon rest his hands on the pole of his boat. Let Cerberus sleep with 3 great heads lowered. Let the shades gather like mist among black trees. Nothing here asks you to be braver than you are tonight. The story is not a command. It is companionship. It says that human beings have always known this ache, that love reaches beyond what it can hold, and that music begins where ordinary speech grows tired. Return for a moment to the lyre itself. A lyre is made of tension. Without tension, the strings cannot sing. Too loose, and there is no note. Too tight, and the string breaks. Between those two failures lives music. Perhaps Orpheus's myth is also about this fragile tuning. A human life is stretched between memory and forgetting, hope and acceptance, love and loss, earth and the underworld. We cannot live with no tension at all. We cannot live if the tension never eases. The art is in the tuning, and the tuning is never permanent. Each day changes the weather inside the heart. Each night asks for a slightly different song. Calliope, if she watches her son, watches the cost of the gift she gave. The muse of epic poetry knows that great stories are not always kind to those who must live them. Apollo, bright god of music, may hear in Orpheus's song both devotion and wound. Dionysus, if his shadow passes through the later ending, brings another truth. Music can soothe, but it can also loosen, dissolve, overwhelm. The Greek gods are not simple moral lessons. They are powers, each with beauty and danger. Orpheus stands among them not as an equal, but as a mortal whose art draws divine attention. That attention is magnificent. It is also perilous. To sing deeply is to invite the world to answer, and the world's answer is not always what the singer hoped. Still, how poor the world would be without the song. Imagine the underworld if Orpheus had never entered it. Charon ferrying without pause, Cerberus watching without rest, the shades moving in their grey habits, Hades and Persephone enthroned in the same solemn balance. Then a living note descends, and for a little while everything remembers tenderness. Even if Eurydice is not restored, the underworld has heard love spoken in its own halls. This matters, not because it changes the law forever, but because it reveals that no place is entirely beyond address. Even silence can be sung to, even the unseen can receive a name. There is comfort in that, a quiet comfort suitable for night. You may not be able to bring back what has gone, none of us can, but you can name it gently. You can make a place for it in memory. You can let beauty approach the wound, not to close it by force, but to sit beside it. Orpheus teaches the danger of believing art can command every outcome, but he also teaches the necessity of singing anyway. If he had stayed silent, Eurydice would still have died, and the underworld would never have trembled with compassion. Because he sang, the world gained a story in which even death had to listen. The path of Orpheus also reminds us that descent is not always failure. In many spiritual traditions, the way down is part of the way through. Seeds go down before they rise. The sun appears to sink before morning returns. Persephone descends and ascends with the seasons. Dreams take us downward into the hidden mind so that waking life can continue. Orpheus descends because grief has opened a cavern in him, and he chooses to enter it rather than stand forever at its edge. He does not emerge with what he wanted, but he emerges with a song that countless others will use when they reach their own thresholds. This is not triumph, it is transmission. Transmission is a gentle word for what myths do. They carry. They carry names across languages, across broken temples, across manuscripts copied by tired hands, across paintings, operas, poems, and quiet retellings beside bedsides. Orpheus and Eurydice have been sung by Romans, medieval writers, Renaissance composers, modern poets, and many voices in between. Each age hears something different. One hears obedience, another hears the psychology of grief, another hears the artist's power, another hears the beloved's silence, another hears the impossibility of returning unchanged from loss. The myth survives because it is not exhausted by any one interpretation. Like the lyre, it waits for each hand to draw out a new resonance. There are other small thresholds hidden within the myth, and each one slows the heart in a different way. The wedding threshold, where Eurydice steps from maidenhood into marriage. The meadow threshold, where joy crosses into loss before anyone can prepare. The cave threshold, where Orpheus leaves the human day. The river threshold, where Charon measures who may pass. The palace threshold, where music enters law. The final threshold, where daylight touches Orpheus before it touches Eurydice. The story is built from crossings, and perhaps that is why it belongs so naturally beside sleep. Sleep is also a crossing made of trust. You lie down in one world of thought and effort, then pass into another, where the rules are softer, stranger, and older than waking speech. In the middle of such crossings, Hermes might be imagined nearby, though he is not always named in the familiar versions. Hermes is the guide of souls, the psychopomp, the one who knows roads, boundaries, tricks, messages, and safe passage through uncertain places. He moves between Olympus, Earth, and Hades more lightly than most gods, his sandals touching all realms. If Apollo gives Orpheus the bright discipline of music, Hermes gives the myth its road sense, its knowledge that every message must travel through risk. A song is a message sent into the unknown. Orpheus sends his song ahead of him, like a small winged guide. It reaches Charon before his body is accepted. It reaches Cerberus before his hand could ever pass. It reaches Persephone before any argument could. The presence of Persephone deserves its own quiet attention. She's not only queen of the dead and not only the lost daughter of Demeter, she is both. She remembers flowers and shadow, hunger and return, the taste of pomegranate seeds and the cry of a mother searching the earth. When Orpheus sings before her, he sings before someone who knows what it means for a life to be divided between above and below. This does not make her all-powerful against the law of Hades, but it makes her capable of hearing the plea differently. The myth may be telling us that compassion often comes from divided experience. Those who have lived in more than one world can sometimes make a small bridge for others. Hades too becomes more complex when we let the story breathe. He is easy to imagine as a dark obstacle, but Greek myth gives him a different dignity. He rarely leaves his realm. He does not chase glory like Zeus or bright honor like Apollo. He keeps what is given to him by cosmic order. Every family eventually sends someone to his house. Every city, every battlefield, every old bed and newborn cradle exists under his distant certainty. To move such a god is not like persuading a sentimental king. It is like persuading winter to pause at the edge of spring. Orpheus does not melt Hades into weakness. He reveals to him a particular sorrow inside the universal law. This is why the condition matters. Hades and Persephone do not simply reverse death. They make a narrow passage through it, a passage that requires trust, because trust is the only shape strong enough and light enough to cross. If Orpheus could drag Eurydice by the hand, the return would be possession. If he could command her with music, the return would be enchantment. Instead, she must follow freely, and he must not turn her into an object of sight before the passage is complete. The rule protects something mysterious. It says that the beloved is not fully restored by being watched. She must arrive in her own time. Love must make room for that arrival. Seen this way, the glance becomes not only fear, but impatience, born from agony. Orpheus wants the return to be complete before it is complete. He wants the proof before the passage is finished. How many human sorrows contain this same impatience? We want healing to be visible before healing has reached the surface. We want forgiveness to speak before the heart has found words. We want morning while it is still night, because we can smell the first cold hint of dawn. The myth is severe because it says that some processes cannot be hurried even by love. The last steps are still steps. The threshold remains a threshold until both have crossed. Eurydice's following also contains a quiet strength. She does not lead the story by action in the old texts, but following through darkness can be an action of extraordinary courage. She has already died. She has already entered the realm from which mortals do not return. Then, by the grace of a song and the pity or judgment of the gods, she is asked to walk upward, behind the man who loves her, unable to receive his gaze, perhaps unable to reassure him. She must trust that he will keep the command. She must trust the path. She must trust that the light ahead is truly meant for her. Her silence is not emptiness, it is endurance. When Orpheus turns, the loss that follows is also the loss of that shared endurance. For a moment, both had been participating in one fragile act of faith. He walked without seeing. She followed without being seen. The act required both of them, and it breaks in the space between them. That is why the moment feels so intimate. It is not a public catastrophe. There is no battlefield, no crashing palace, no god-hurling thunder. There is only a man, a woman, a threshold, and one motion of the head. Myth understands that the smallest gestures can carry the greatest weight. A glance can undo what a journey achieved. A whisper can open a wound. A pause can become mercy. Yet even undone things leave traces. The path from Hades to daylight has been walked by Eurydice, almost to the end. The underworld has known the footsteps of return. Orpheus has seen that the dead are not beyond the reach of song, even if they remain beyond possession. The gods have shown that law can bend into condition, if not into reversal. These traces matter in the symbolic life of the myth. They become openings for later imagination, for mysteries, for prayers, for poems in which the soul seeks guidance after death. An almost completed journey is still a journey. A failed rescue can still become a map. The Orphic tablets, those small leaves of gold placed with the dead, speak in a voice very different from a love story, yet they seem to shimmer with related concerns. They instruct the soul to say that it is a child of earth and starry heaven, that it is parched with thirst, that it seeks cool water from the lake of memory. Whether every tablet belongs directly to what we call Orphic belief is a question for careful scholars, but the mood is close to Orpheus. The soul travelling, the need to remember, the danger of forgetting, the hope that the right words can guide one through the unseen. The singer becomes, across time, a keeper of passwords for darkness. This connection between song and right speech is ancient. In many cultures, words do not merely describe reality, they help open or close it. A blessing is not just information, a lament is not just sadness, a hymn is not just praise. The correct name, spoken with reverence, can place the speaker in relationship with powers too large for ordinary handling. Orpheus's music has this sacred quality. He does not win the underworld by cleverness. He speaks the right grief in the right place with the right humility. His song is a ritual action, a shaped offering. It gives sorrow form, and form allows sorrow to stand before the gods. For a sleep story, form matters as well. The mind resting at night does not want a jagged account full of shocks and sharp corners. It wants a path of repeated images: lyre, river, cave, footstep, breath, star. Repetition is not emptiness. Repetition is how lullabies work, how waves work, how walking works. Orpheus's myth has been repeated for so long that it has become a kind of cultural lullaby for grief, though a dark one. Each retelling plucks the same strings in a slightly different order. Each listener knows or senses that the glance will come. The sorrow is expected, and because it is expected, it can be held. There is a mercy in known sorrow. A sudden grief in life can feel chaotic, meaningless, beyond language. A sorrow in myth has shape. It begins, descends, turns, and fades. We can enter it and leave it. We can cry for Orpheus and Eurydice without being destroyed by them, because the story holds the edges. This is one reason people have always needed tragic tales, not because suffering is pleasant, but because shaped suffering teaches the heart that pain can be contained within meaning, music, and shared attention. The myth does not make loss good, it makes loss speakable. The landscape of the story also teaches slowness. Nothing important happens at modern speed. The lyre is tuned by hand, the wedding gathers by foot and voice, the snake hides in grass, part of the old, patient earth. Orpheus mourns through days and nights. The descent is walked, not rushed. Charon rows, Cerberus lowers his heads one by one. Hades listens before judging. The ascent is step after step after step. Even the fatal glance has power because it comes after so much waiting. In a hurried mind, the myth becomes a summary. In a slow mind, it becomes a chamber where every image has time to glow. So let the slow mind have the story now. Let the details stretch out like shadows at evening. Orpheus's fingers on strings, Eurydice's feet in meadow grass, the cold lip of the cave, the dark river without stars, the old ferryman's listening face, the great hound soothed into sleep, the shades remembering rain, Persephone's eyes carrying spring and winter together, Hades' hand resting on the arm of his throne, the upward path narrowing toward light, Eurydice close behind, Orpheus almost faithful to the end, the turn, the farewell, the echo. If there is wisdom here, it is not bright wisdom, it is underworld wisdom, the kind learned in dimness. It says that love is powerful, but not controlling. It says that art is sacred, but not omnipotent. It says that grief can become a road, but the road may not lead where we ask. It says that the dead are gone, and also that memory keeps a living relation with them. It says that weakness can live inside devotion. It says that almost is painful, but not meaningless. It says that a song which fails to save one life may still save many hearts from wordless loneliness. And perhaps, most gently, it says that no human being is only the worst moment of their fear. Orpheus is not only the man who looked back, he is also the man who loved deeply enough to descend, the singer who gave rest to the restless dead, the mourner who turned private anguish into a music the world could inherit. Eurydice is not only the woman lost twice, she is also the beloved who listened, the bride who walked the dark path upward, the quiet presence whose name still summons tenderness. The myth does not erase the fatal instant, it surrounds it with enough beauty and sorrow that judgment softens into understanding. Tonight, the story draws out the sleep note, the slow note, the one that does not argue. We let Orpheus be gifted and broken. We let Eurydice be loved and lost, and more than lost. We let Hades be stern without making him cruel. We let Persephone be compassionate without making her lawless. We let the backward glance remain both mistake and revelation. Above all, we let the story breathe. There is no need to tighten it into a lesson too quickly. A myth held gently can be more healing than a myth explained completely. The ancient world around this story was full of ritual sound. Hymns rose at altars, flutes sounded at processions, women sang laments for the dead, shaping grief into repeated phrases so the community could bear it. Work songs measured labor. Wedding songs carried people over thresholds. Lullabies guarded infants at the edge of sleep. Orpheus gathers all of these functions into one impossible figure. He is wedding singer, mourner, traveler, priest, lover, and guide. His lyre accompanies joy, then grief, then descent, then memory. This is why his story belongs so naturally to nighttime. Night is also a threshold. We leave the bright world of tasks and enter a region where images speak more freely than arguments. One more quiet strand belongs here, the strand of the listener. Orpheus is famous because the world listens to him, but the myth has survived because we listen to the world through him. We become, for a while, like the stones and trees, drawn closer by a sound we cannot fully explain. We listen to grief without turning away. We listen to love without demanding that it end neatly. We listen to the Underworld not as a place of spectacle, but as the deep background against which mortal tenderness becomes visible. This listening is active even when the body is still. It is a kind of inward hospitality. The story arrives tired from centuries of travel, and we give it a place by the fire of attention. In return, the story asks very little. It does not ask us to become heroes. It does not ask us to descend tonight into our own deepest chambers and return with perfect answers. It only asks us to notice the music hidden inside longing. It asks us to be careful with the names of the lost. It asks us to understand that the heart may turn back sometimes, and that even then, the song need not be over. Orpheus's later music is wounded, but it is still music. There are days when that is enough, not healing completed, not wisdom mastered, only the continued ability to make or receive one honest note after another. And when the ancient poets say that trees followed him, perhaps they also mean that the rooted parts of us can move. The parts we think are fixed in sorrow, fixed in fear, fixed in old memory, may lean a little toward beauty. They may not uproot themselves all at once, they may not cross the whole forest, but they can incline, they can listen, they can admit that something gentle has entered the clearing. This is enough for night, a small inward leaning toward rest, a loosening in the roots, a sense that even after the darkest tale, the breath can continue its slow work. There is no hurry in this leaning. The old song has waited through many nights, and it can wait through this one too. Let it be patient with you, as darkness is patient with the stars. As you listen, perhaps your own breath has slowed a little. Perhaps the room has become less sharp. The mind may still wander, as minds do. Let it wander through Thrace, over dark hills and quiet rivers. Let it stand at the wedding among flowers. Let it rest beside Orpheus when he first understands that loss has no immediate remedy. Let it drift with Charon's boat. Let it rest in imagination beside the heavy sleeping heads of Cerberus, no longer fearful, only tired from guarding. Let it sit at the edge of the hall where Hades and Persephone listen. Let it climb the long path upward without needing to know whether it would turn. There is a tenderness in admitting that we might turn. Many people hear the myth and insist they would not. But perhaps sleep comes more easily when we do not need to be better than Orpheus. Perhaps we can say, yes, I understand the glance. I understand the sudden fear, the ache for the face, the terrible closeness of hope. Understanding is not the same as approval. It is simply a loosening of judgment. Myths do not ask us to stand above their characters like judges in daylight. They invite us to sit beside them in the half-dark and recognize the human shape of their mistakes, and Eurydice, fading, can be held not as punishment, but as sorrow. She returns to the underworld, but not to oblivion. Orpheus remembers her. The poets remember her. We remember her now. Her name continues to move through the living air. In that sense, the song does bring something back, though not the body, not the years, not the daily presence Orpheus begged for. It brings back the fact of love. It brings back the meadow, the wedding, the nearly completed ascent. It brings back the image of a woman at the threshold, seen and lost, and asks us to treat her with reverence rather than use her only as a symbol of failure. The underworld too changes in our imagination because of her. It is not only a storage place for shades, it becomes the place where Eurydice waits, where Persephone understands, where Hades can be moved once, where music can travel. Ancient people feared the dead, honored the dead, fed the dead with offerings, spoke to them at tombs, remembered them in rituals. The boundary was firm, but not loveless. Orpheus's Descent dramatizes that relationship. The living cannot simply retrieve the dead, but they can address them, they can honor them, they can carry their names upward like small lamps. Small lamps are enough for night. We do not need the sun yet. The story itself is a lamp, not blazing, but steady. It shows a man walking into darkness with an instrument. It shows that beauty is not naive just because it is gentle. The lyre does not deny the underworld. It enters it. It does not pretend Cerberus is harmless. It soothes him. It does not claim Hades has no authority. It speaks before that authority with humility. This is a mature kind of beauty, one that knows shadow and still chooses music. For sleep, such beauty is safer than brightness. It does not dazzle, it accompanies. If the myth were a piece of music, its opening would be a single plucked string, then a second string answering, then a low drone beneath, the sound of fate. Eurydice's theme would enter lightly, perhaps in a mode that sounds like morning. The wedding would rise, then falter. The descent would move into lower tones, slow and resonant. Charon's oar would mark a rhythm. Cerberus would be a deep chord, resolving into rest. Hades and Persephone would be two solemn notes held together, one dark, one pale. The ascent would be almost silent, only a heartbeat. The backward glance would not be a crash, it would be one note stopping before it should. Then the remainder would be echo. Echo is central to grief. After loss, the mind hears echoes everywhere. A phrase the beloved used, a place they stood, a song they liked, a habit of turning to tell them something before remembering. Orpheus lives in echo after Eurydice. His music becomes the art of echo, calling into spaces where no full answer returns. But echo is not nothing. It means the world still has surfaces that can carry sound back. It means the call mattered enough to return changed. Myths themselves are echoes. We do not hear the first singer of Orpheus. We hear the returning sound through time, altered by each valley it has crossed. In the Orphic imagination, memory is sacred because forgetting is a second death. Yet sleep asks for a kind of forgetting, a gentle, temporary release. This may seem like a contradiction, but it is not. There is a harsh forgetting that erases what should be honored, and there is a healing forgetting that lets the body rest. Tonight, you can allow the second kind. You do not have to hold every detail. You can let the names become soft. Orpheus, Eurydice, Calliope, Apollo, Hades, Persephone. You can let them arrange themselves like stars present even when your eyes close. The story will remain. It does not need your effort to keep existing. Perhaps somewhere in the old imagined Thrace, after all the sorrow, a traveller passes at dusk and hears a sound among reeds. It might be wind, it might be water, it might be the remembered lyre. The traveller stops, not frightened, only stilled. For a moment, the ordinary world opens into depth. The path, the river, the trees, the first evening star all seem to listen to one another. Then the sound fades, and the traveller continues, carrying a quiet they cannot explain. This is how Orpheus remains in the world, not always as a grand performance, but as a sudden attentiveness, a hush before sleep, a tenderness toward what is gone. Let us imagine, too, that Eurydice has her own peace beyond the reach of Orpheus's anguish. Ancient myth does not always give comfort in the way modern hearts request it, but we may hold a gentle image. In the fields below, where asphodel grows pale in the dimness, she is not in pain. She is among the dead, but the dead are not always tormented in Greek imagination. Many simply dwell, shadowed and quiet. Perhaps Persephone remembers her. Perhaps the song that almost freed her remains like warmth in that cool realm. Perhaps, when Orpheus's own time finally comes, no backward glance is needed, because both are already on the same side of the threshold. Some traditions suggest reunion, others are silent. Let the silence be kind. Silence can be kind when it is not empty. The silence after music is part of music. The silence after a name is spoken can hold the name tenderly. The silence before sleep can hold the day without demanding more from it. Orpheus's story is full of silences. Eurydice behind him, the dead listening, Hades considering, the closed gate after the second loss. Each silence has a different weight. Some are terrible, some are holy, some are simply waiting. As you rest, you may let the silences separate and soften. Not every silence is abandonment. Some silences are the room in which the next breath arrives. The breath is important. Orpheus's art depends on breath, even when the lyre carries the melody. Singing is breath-shaped by longing. Grief changes breath. It catches, shortens, stops, returns. Sleep also changes breath, lengthening it, smoothing it, teaching the body that for now it is safe enough to let go. So perhaps the closing gift of this myth for the night is not an answer, but a rhythm. Inhale the living world, exhale the underworld, inhale memory, exhale release. Inhale the face beloved, exhale the trust to walk without seeing for a little while. Do not force this rhythm. Let it find you if it wants. The story has traveled far enough. Orpheus has set down his lyre for a moment. Eurydice has become a soft brightness in the mind. Charon's boat is tied to its dark post. Cerberus sleeps. The shades return to their wandering, perhaps a little less lonely for having heard a living song. Hades and Persephone sit in their deep hall, not unkind, not simple, keeping the balance that even gods must keep. Above, in the world of grass and moonlight, the cave mouth is quiet. Night covers it with dew. The lyre begins again, but more softly now, almost too softly to hear. One note, then another. The sound is not asking you to follow into sorrow anymore. It is guiding you away from the sharp edge of the tale toward rest. It says that love has been named. It says that loss has been honored. It says that the old story can keep watch while you sleep. You do not need to hold the whole myth in your waking mind. Let the details drift. Let Thrace become a dark hillside. Let the underworld become a cool cave of dreams. Let Eurydice's footsteps become the faint pulse of your own heart. Let Orpheus's song become the sound of breathing in a quiet room. And if, somewhere near the edge of sleep, you feel the wish to look back over the day, do it gently. Look without judgment, see what was bright, see what was difficult, see what you could not change. Then turn again toward the dark ahead, not as a place of fear, but as a place of rest. The night does not require you to solve your griefs before entering it. It asks only that you loosen your grip a little. Orpheus held too tightly at the threshold, and we love him for it, because we understand. But now, for sleep, you may practice the other movement. You may let the unseen be unseen. You may trust the quiet behind you. The last note of the lyre fades. It does not end suddenly. It thins into the air until the air itself seems to remember it. This is how music leaves, not by vanishing, but by becoming indistinguishable from silence. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice remains there in that tender silence, neither fully happy nor without comfort. It is a night story, a threshold story, a story for anyone who has ever loved what could not be kept. Let it rest now. Let the strings grow still. Let the river move in darkness. Let the old gods close their eyes. Let the beloved names be safe in memory. And let yourself, slowly and without effort, drift towards sleep. Good evening and welcome back, one last time, to the slow, gentle work of letting the story rest. Get cozy, settle in, and let us begin the long lowering of the lamp. The tale of Orpheus and Eurydice has been carried by many tongues across the ages, by lovers and mourners, by musicians who could not quite say what their song was for, by old singers who knew that grief and beauty often share a single string. In the beginning, before any of these tellings, there was only a quieter rumour of the song that almost outsang loss, a feeling that the world might still be addressed, even when no full answer returned. The old poets later gave it names. They gave it Orpheus, Eurydice, Hades, and Persephone in their deep hall. They gave it the long stillness in which it now rests. But that is a story for another day. For now, remember this. Tonight, the work of the tale is done. It simply was, like all old stories, the carrying of love passing through silence through the long inheritance of nights. Let the names settle. Let the room settle. Let the night gather you up. Imagine the river of shades far behind you, the lyre's last fading note no longer pressing on your thoughts. In your mind, reach back and close an invisible door to the underworld, feeling it move on silent hinges, sealing the song, the lost glance, and the long ache of almost in calm and order. Then see a single candle, its flame steady in the darkness. With a slow, gentle breath, blow that candle out and let the last curl of light fade into the night. Rest well, sleep deeply, and let the ancient stories carry you into the night.